the first degree, Arthur Radley is being charged for the murder of Bob Ewell. All evidence and testimonies have been laid out, and it is now up to our jury to decide if there is enough reasonable doubt to prove the accused not guilty. If there is any trace of reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant, then he must be found not guilty. If, however, there is not a speck of reasonable doubt, then he must be found guilty. The verdict must be unanimous, or else you are having a hung jury and are to pass this trial to another set of 6 men or women. The fate of a man is now in your hands, and therefore I urge you to deliberate honestly and thoughtfully. Thank you. Jury, retire. Why am I even here? Is this the price I have to pay for being a citizen of the United States? To be imprisoned in a cold little room to talk about nothing that really matters to me?
This is your responsibility. You're serving your country and you should be honored to have been delegated for this duty.
You said duty.
Well, okay, none of us want to be here longer than we have to, so let's get down to business.
To defeat the Huns. Okay, well, we need to get going. Where do we even begin? We sat in there for hours listening to them go on and on about the same pieces of evidence.
It's not their fault they didn't have much evidence to work with, but we should see where we stand first. Let's take a vote.
Shall we have an open vote or a secret ballot?
I want an open vote.
I think it should be a secret ballot so that we don't hold grudges against one another from the very beginning.
Well, we all know how everyone is going to vote already. Obviously, he's guilty.
No, you don't know that for sure. Let's vote.
Okay, I'll go get paper and pens from the guard.
Excuse me, it is forbidden to have any electronic devices out at this time because we don't want any external information permeating into the room that may influence our verdict on this case.
I will throw your phone out of the window if you do not put it away.
The correct term would be defenestrate.
I don't want to stay here any longer than I have to, even if it means we didn't follow the rules.
What is going on here?
We were just going over legal obligations.
He's lying. Well, okay. We should get started. Let's vote. When you're finished, fold your paper and put it in the middle of the table.
What are you doing?
I need to get a good grade.
This isn't a test.
It's not?
Okay. Guilty. Guilty. Not guilty. Guilty. Not guilty. Guilty? No.
Why did you stutter at the end?
Can you not read?
No. Someone doesn't know how to spell. It's spelled Giltey.
Moving on.
I think there is reasonable doubt.
I knew you're the one who put not guilty.
No, she wasn't the only one. Let's talk evidence.
I think that he is not guilty because the knife that was used in the murder belonged to Bob Ewell, the victim, and not Mr. Radley.
And how do you know that?
Actually, this caught my eye when I wasn't listening to all the nonsense in the courtroom. It has Ewell carved into the handle.
Well, Arthur could have easily come up and grabbed the knife out of Ewell's hand.
Ewell was a really strong man, and there's no way that someone who was as scrawny as Mr. Radley could have grabbed the knife out of Bob's hand. You saw him in the courtroom, and everybody in this town knows that he's probably deprived of the basic necessities.
Maybe he did push-ups.
What does that have to do with anything?
Or maybe he's the son of Hercules.
This is ludicrous. Let's stick to the topic. Where were we? Oh, yeah, the ownership of the knife. So we're pretty certain it was Mr. Radley's knife since his name was inscribed on it. Maybe Mr. Ewell left it on his porch one day, and since Mr. Radley was out to get Mr. Ewell, he went to his home first only to find he wasn't there. He took the knife and held on to it until he came across Mr. Radley later that day.
Listen to her. She knows what she's talking about.
But yet, how can we say Mr. Radley even exited his house when he hasn't even left the house in years?
Yes, even Mr. Radley's brother claimed that if Arthur did leave the house, he was unaware, which, in this case, is highly unlikely anything got past him. I mean, he has kept his little brother cooped up in the house for as long as this lonely town can remember.
Exactly.
They have a point. Mr. Radley would not have gone that far without his brother noticing. Stabbing Mr. Ewell a few feet from his house is one thing, but going all the way across town is a whole other topic.
That is a very good argument. What other pieces of evidence do we have to examine?
But what about Arthur's mental state?
Well, we all know he killed his mother years ago. Who's to say he won't kill again?
We don't know that for sure. It is undocumented. And in the case of a significant trial like this, we can't guide our decision on that assumption.
But who else would have done it? Just like who else would have been around to kill Mr. Ewell? Who is our one and only suspect in murder?
But let's take a moment to mourn the death of Mrs. Radley.
Okay, let's screw our heads on back here and take a couple of deep breaths. We are going to get through this alive because I do not plan on sitting through another court case as a witness to another murder.
Well, we can't forget that Arthur's mental state doesn't change the fact that he couldn't have taken the knife from Bob Ewell.
And without the knife, he couldn't have committed the crime.
Speaking of
Amen!
knife, this seems to be the only piece of physical evidence that we have, and it holds a lot of potential for a significant amount of influence on how we decide this case.
Yes. I think I'm going to change my vote to not guilty.
All right. And based on the votes, we are now 3-3, a tie for guilty and not guilty.
Are you kidding me? How could he have killed himself? Are you saying he tripped and fell on his own knife?
Well, actually, according to Miss Jean Louise Finch in her testimony, she heard Bob Ewell fall.
We can't trust her. She's only 8. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Well, it is possible that Bob could have stumbled over one of the tree's roots and fallen onto his own knife.
If he is holding it this way, it is instinct to put your hands down when falling. The blade would have been facing up, and his body weight would have caused him to fall on the blade, letting him bleed to death.
But if he was trying to murder the kids, as the story was supposed to be, he would have been holding the knife downwards. So when he would have fallen and stumbled over the tree, the knife would have stabbed the ground, or he would have completely let go of it, so it couldn't have stabbed him at all.
Yeah, listen to her.
Well, I want to vote again.
Okay, to meet your request, we will vote again. I am still in favor of guilty. 2,
Not guilty.
3,
Guilty.
4,
Not guilty.
5,
Guilty.
6.
Guilty.
Well, we are back to the original votes. 4-2 in favor of guilty.
Are you sure you can even count her votes? She just votes to vote.
Well, I guess we do get an equal say in this discussion.
But wait,
She doesn't even know what she's talking about. I mean, she couldn't even spell the word guilty. At least we're all in the right mindsets here. Again, except for them two.
in order for all of this to occur, Arthur would have had to be facing a window that would allow him to see the tree, or been in a location that would allow him to hear the struggle, both of which are unlikely. Even if he were in these perfect circumstances, what are the chances that he would reach them spanning the 50 feet of land between where he was sitting and the tree before Ewell did anything to the kids? So what is the probability that all of this could occur?
That actually makes sense.
But yet she isn't smart and is never going to be.
But wait, you just voted guilty and now you're defending Mr. Radley?
Oh, can I change my answer to pass the test?
This isn't a test!
Okay, let's calm down. Again, we all have the right to voice our opinions.
I don't care about discussing. We all know he's guilty. Can we leave already?
Well, what this all comes down to is whether or not reasonable doubt exists. First, we need to find what reasonable doubt is. Reasonable doubt means that if there is any logical explanation that could explain why Arthur may not have committed this murder, then we cannot legally vote guilty in this case. In this case, there is clearly reasonable doubt from 2 pieces of evidence. First, we saw that it is possible that Mr. Ewell tripped on the tree root and fell on his knife. And secondly, we saw through the unexpected explanation of juror number 6 that the probability of Arthur actually committing the murder is minuscule. These are two pieces of reasonable doubt that clearly exist, and therefore we must not vote guilty in this case.
So you're saying that he could be not guilty, but because he might not be not guilty, we have to be innocent, even though he might be guilty, because he could still not be guilty.
You know, reasonable doubt is there because when you think about it, it was dark and there was actually no eyewitnesses. So how can you say it was he who committed the crime for sure?
And therefore, my theory concerning that of the existence of reasonable doubt continues to prove to be our deciding factor in our eventual verdict.
Okay, so I assume that we have a change in standings. We should take another open vote. Anybody oppose? Okay then. I am now changing my vote to not guilty due to the existence of reasonable doubt. 2,
Not guilty.
3,
Guilty.
4,
Not guilty.
5,
Not guilty.
6.
Not guilty.
Looks like we are now at a 5-1 vote in favor of not guilty. However, if we cannot come to unanimous decision, we are a hung jury.
Can you just change your vote to not guilty so we can leave?
I am not going to give in to peer pressure.
Good job. Don't do drugs.
Look, I know you see the reasonable doubt, but are just too foolish and cowardly to change your vote and admit that you were wrong.
I have the right to vote what I want to vote. I am not letting this murder go loose on the streets on my watch.
Well, then I guess we are a hung jury since we will never be able to persuade her, and we are going to have to leave the fate of Arthur in the hands of 6 other jurors. We can now take our verdict to Judge Paul.
I can't be wasting so much time here just to come to no decision whatsoever.
And whose fault is that?
Whatever. Murder in the first degree. Arthur Radley is being charged for the murder of Bob Evil in the second trial of the crime. All evidence and testimonies have been laid out, and it is now up to our jury to decide if there is enough reasonable doubt to prove the accused not guilty. If there is any trace of reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant, then he must be found not guilty. If, however, there is not a speck of reasonable doubt, then he must be found guilty. This verdict must be unanimous, or else you are a hung jury and are going to pass this trial once again to another set of 6 men or women. The fate of a man is now in your hands, and therefore I urge you to deliberate honestly and thoughtfully. Thank you. Jury, retire.
Okay, we've all had a really long day. Do you want to take a vote right now and see if we can end it here?
Si, senor.
Okay, anybody against this motion? Alright then, I guess I'll start. I'm in favor of guilty. 2?
Culpable.
In English, please.
En inglés, guilty.
Okay then. 3?
Guilty.
4?
He is so guilty.
5?
Guilty.
6?
Guilty.
Okay, I guess we have our verdict. Mr. Arthur Radley is guilty of murdering Bob Ewell. No further discussion needed. Would anyone like to change their vote to encourage discussion?
Let's get out of here. I have places to go, people to see.
You actually have friends.
What did you say?
Okay, let's be mature here.
Alright, I'm out. Jury dismissed. I'll take our decision to Judge Paul while the rest of y'all sit here and waste time. I want to go because I've got a hot date waiting for me.
I kind of suck.
Yawn.
We just like the view.